A brand new jumbo jet is flying in slow circles over a dark swamp. On board, 3 experienced pilots are staring at a single small light on the instrument panel. A light that will not turn on. It is a burned-out bulby. It is worth less than $1. And while all 3 men look at it, no one is looking at the one number that matters. Their aircraft is sinking toward the ground, 1 foot at a time, and they have about 90 seconds left before the last of them realizes it. In late 1972, the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar represented the peak of commercial aviation technology. It was a massive, wide-body jumbo jet equipped with an advanced autopilot and automated systems that pilots were still learning to trust. Eastern Airlines had taken delivery of this specific airliner, registered as N310EA, just 4 months earlier. The airframe had accumulated only 340 hours of flight time. On the evening of December 29th, the factory new jet departed New York's JFK, bound for Miami. The cabin was filled with holiday travelers, carrying 152 passengers and a crew of 9. At the controls was Captain Robert Loft, a veteran with over 16,000 hours in the air. The weather was clear, the aircraft was completely healthy, and the trip south proceeded normally. It was a routine flight operated by a capable crew in the most advanced passenger jet in the sky. Beside Captain Loft sat First Officer Albert Stockstill, a 38-year-old pilot with nearly 6,000 flight hours, who was handling the controls for the approach. Behind them was 31-year-old Second Officer Donald Repo, the flight engineer responsible for monitoring the TriStar's complex systems. Just before midnight, the crew began their descent toward Miami International Airport. It was a clear, quiet night. As they neared the runway, Stockstill lowered the landing gear lever. 3 green lights should have illuminated on the panel, confirming that each wheel was down and locked. Only 2 turned on. The indicator for the nose landing gear remained dark. The nose landing gear was actually down and locked. The failure lay entirely within the indicator casing, where 2 tiny incandescent bulbs, worth less than $1 each, had both burned out. But in the cockpit, the dark lens meant uncertainty. Captain Loft made a standard, cautious decision. He chose to abandon the approach until they could verify the nose wheel was safe. Loft contacted air traffic control to report they were going around. The controller instructed them to climb to 2,000 feet and hold to the west, directing the factory new jet out over the pitch-black darkness of the Florida Everglades. Holding at 2,000 feet, the cockpit of N310EA became a workshop of narrow focus. All 3 men converged on the dark nose gear lens. First Officer Stockstill pulled the indicator housing from the panel, but the small plastic assembly jammed on its side, resisting their efforts. Captain Loft told Second Officer Repo to go below. Repo stood up, squeezed through the small hatch, and descended into the forward electronics bay to look through the optical viewing port. Before turning his attention to the light, Loft instructed Stockstill to put the aircraft on autopilot to maintain their altitude. They trusted the advanced TriStar to hold them safely at 2,000 feet. But as Loft turned in his seat to speak to Repo, his body brushed against the control column. The pressure was slight, just over 15 pounds, but it was enough. The Sperry autopilot responded instantly to the manual input. It silently disengaged from altitude hold mode and reverted to control wheel steering. There was no master warning, no flashing red light, and no loud alarm to alert the pilots. The wide-body jet began a gradual, unhurried descent. At roughly 1,300 feet per minute, the sink rate was too gentle to be felt physically. Outside the cockpit windows, the pitch-black Florida Everglades offered no horizon, no city lights, and no visual reference to show they were falling. At 23 hours, 40 minutes, and 1 second, an altitude warning chime sounded. The 105 decibel tone came from the flight engineer's panel. Nobody on the flight deck reacted. Second Officer Donald Repo was no longer at his station. He had crawled down into the electronics bay beneath the cockpit, trying to inspect the nose gear through a small optical viewing port. But the light switch on the captain's panel had not been turned on, leaving Repo staring into total darkness. On the ground, a Miami approach controller noticed the aircraft's radar altitude briefly dropped to 200 feet. Because the new radar system was prone to false returns from ground clutter, the display did not immediately signal danger. The controller asked the crew how things were going, received a calm, routine reply, and looked away. For 90 seconds, the jumbo jet descended steadily toward the black swamp, completely unnoticed. The crew's attention remained entirely divided between the dark bulb and the landing gear. In the final seconds, Stockstill finally glanced at his altimeter and realized they had lost altitude. "We did something to the altitude," he said. Loft looked up. "Hey, what's happening here?" At 11:42 p.m., the Lockheed L-1011 struck the Everglades. The aircraft was in a slight left bank, flying at over 200 miles per hour when its wingtip clipped the water, 18 miles west-northwest of Miami International Airport. The immense speed tore the wide-body jet apart. The fuselage broke into 3 main sections, scattering debris and cargo across a trail of dark water and dense sawgrass. The engines fell silent. The brand-new airliner lay shattered in the black swamp. Of the 176 people on board, 75 survived. The soft, muddy swamp of the Everglades absorbed much of the impact forces, and the thick muck temporarily sealed some survivors' wounds. But the water also brought immediate danger. Jet fuel coated the dark pools, and the swamp mud carried bacteria that quickly infected open flesh. Debris was scattered across miles of roadless, pitch-black wetland. The first rescuer to reach the scene was Bud Marcus, a local frog hunter out on his airboat. Navigating by the glow of the wreckage, Marcus pulled survivors from the water, working alone in the dark. It would take hours for helicopters and rescue teams to reach the remote site and carry the injured to safety. NTSB investigators pulled the flight recorders from the mud and examined the shattered components. Physical evidence proved the nose landing gear was down and fully locked at impact. The TriStar had no mechanical defects other than 2 burned-out light bulbs. The investigation centered on the flight deck's focus. Preoccupied with the dark indicator, the crew failed to monitor their primary flight instruments. During Captain Loft's autopsy, doctors found an undetected benign brain tumor in his visual cortex. Investigators analyzed his medical history and concluded the tumor did not affect his performance. An airworthy airliner had been flown into the ground simply because nobody was flying it. Flight 401 became a foundational case study for crew resource management, reshaping how cockpit crews operate. Airlines restructured training around a strict division of duties, guaranteeing that at least one pilot remained solely focused on flying the aircraft. Regulators also mandated redesigned altitude alerts and warning systems, making sure deviations were impossible to ignore. In the years that followed, the psychological weight of the tragedy sparked ghost stories among Eastern staff about the deceased crew, an enduring piece of aviation folklore that reflected the human cost of a crash caused by a single, unlit bulb. Today, every flight we take relies on the cockpit culture forged in the Everglades. Yet as technology grows increasingly automated, the fundamental vulnerability remains unchanged. The danger is rarely the machine itself. It is the fragile, fleeting nature of human attention. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts below.